Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode here of the Lonely Wrist podcast. I am your host, as always, Blake Ray. And now on today's show, we are sitting down with the Norwegian brand that focuses on producing timekeeping instruments for military units, first responders, and anybody else that's looking for a watch that can keep up with them instead of having to keep up with your watch. By now, you know we are sitting down with Micro Milspec, which is a Swiss-made tool watch brand coming straight out of Oslo. And sitting down with us is Theodore. Theodore, welcome to the Lonely Wrist podcast.
Thank you very much for having me, Blake, and hopefully I'll be making you feel a little bit less lonely today. So,
yes, that would be exceptional. So, I can't tell you how excited I am for this one because I mean, Micro Milspec is a brand to me that kind of like epitomizes what I enjoy about watches. You know, something that you could just beat to shit, right? Like that will essentially like live with you. And you know, I've been getting into vintage watches, right? So like I have two polar opposites. So like I'm obsessed with like rugged tool watches and like vintage watches that have like stories and charm. So like you guys are on the far left of that spectrum, you know, and yeah, I just had the Black Badger on, and
I saw.
we talked in the episode briefly about Micro Milspec and his Milgraph that he got and that he designed and that he was like I think he even like put it on during the show, if I remember correctly. And he was so stoked. And then I've been going back and forth with Anna for a while and just trying to figure out like syncing things up. And it seems that you guys are never at the same place that I'm at. So finally we got this going. So
it was blood, sweat, and tears, but we got there. But Anna is very, very persistent and very good at nagging me to turn up to an event or to a podcast or whatever I need to do. She tells me I follow.
she didn't have to nag me, which was cool because you know
she had to nag me.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. So tell me about like the origin story for Micro Milspec. Obviously, you guys are based in Oslo, Norway, and you guys make limited runs, tool watches, you know, special operation, utility, first responders, military units. Like how did Micro Milspec like get off the ground?
Yeah, I mean, it was founded by two people, being Henrik and Martin. And Martin is part of the Norwegian Special Forces, and Henrik is pretty much the CEO and the technical guy behind the brand itself. So originally, the story goes is that he was working in the back of this watch shop in Oslo, working on another watch company at the time, and he was trying to figure out what his next moves was because he was tired of the current business that he was set up in, and he wanted to pivot off in a different direction. And at the time, Martin came into the store and was requesting help to try and create his own bespoke watch from A to Z. And he had been looking for several months and had been communicating with other brands. But, you know, when he was speaking to Amiga, he was forced to use the Speedmaster as a base model. Then when he went to Tudor, as the Pelagos. With Blancpain, I can't remember the name of the watch he was imposed, but he was imposed another model. And in his mind, he was like, I just want to be able to create my watch from A to Z with all of the DNA that I want to put inside of it. And at the time, Henrik could hear the conversation happening in the back office. And then he came to the front and was like, well, I can do this for you. I've already got a watch brand, but, you know, let's try and create our own one called Micro Milspec, and let's specialize in custom watches. And little by little, you know, they delivered the first product being, you know, the variation of the Milgraph of what we see today. And now I think we've done over 48 projects across 29 different armies, and it's still growing. We still do it as part of our core business model. And both of them are still heavily involved in the business today. You know, I'd say you have Henrik, who's the B2C guy, and then you have Martin, who will be the B2B guy, because he's frequently often he still serves in the special forces, and he's consistently traveling the world. And as soon as he's able to tell his story around his watch, typically we then have that army reaching out to us wanting to do their own projects. So it's a never ending, you know, positive cycle of friendship, and also, you know, watches and trying to do something different as well than what already exists out there.
Yeah. And something too that I've noticed as I've been doing research for this podcast, there's like there's tool watches, right? And then there's like extreme like utility watches, which is what I would
100%.
put you guys in the class of. Like, so you know, with your time at Micro Milspec, like what would you say makes a watch more suitable for like special operations versus like a typical tool watch?
I mean, we regularly test all our watches. So we have one watch called the field testing unit, and every single time, you know, when someone wants to start a project with us, we'll send them the field testing unit as a watch to be tested across a period of 6 months. And based off all the knots and bruises and damage it would have taken, that's how we start working on a design in terms of understanding how the person wears the watch, to then create a specific model and a design that works for that individual. So like for the Milgraph, it was to not have steel, but have titanium because it's lighter and more robust. It was also not use a Solida movement, but a La Jouperet movement, because it's a lot more precise and can take a lot more of a bashing as well. And, you know, everything was thought out to be able to ensure that that watch could be used in the mission. And it is.
And I guess like, let's just jump into the shoes of maybe one of those operators who like has the field testing unit. Like do you guys send them like a set of instructions to say like, hey, here's what you need to pay attention to? Like here's, or is it just kind of like very broad and open and collaborative in the sense that like you kind of give them freedom and flexibility, like to design like what would be your next, you know, edition?
It's total freedom, and that tends to be the reason why people come and reach out to us. Is that they're really, if they want a triangle, you know, rectangle, a square, whatever type of watch they want, typically we can design it, and that is the main reason why people reach out to us. So like we have a good example with Les Nageurs de Combat, which is a French Marine Corps based out in Corsica. They've had various different, you know, manufacturers produce watches for their squadron, being Omega, Blancpain, Tudor, and a couple of others. And eventually they came to us just to be like, look, we just once again want to design our own watch from A to Z, and to really create something that regroups the entire squadron. Because as much as durability and everything, you know, all those facts are there to be true, what a squadron wants as well is an item and a watch that kind of encompasses every single thing that is important to them. So for them will be family in some cases, so they'll want a GMT so they could put it on the time zone of home. Others will be logos of the squadron. Others, you know, even we've had some watches where they've hidden, you know, specific codes and messages and messaging into the movement itself, that only they know where, you know, they need to look to find that detail. So, you know, the watch as well is kind of a unification, and, you know, it helps create a family within people who don't really know each other, but who spend more time with them than their actual own family. So I think it's quite a fun project, because every single time that you hear a squadron wanting to create a new watch, their story is totally different from anything else we would have heard before. And it's always quite a fun, you know, process of them testing it, then, you know, getting a prototype made, sending it back to them. Actually, I don't like those colors, try this and that. And it's quite a fun process, I have to say.
Would you say that like operators are giving like different feedback than like a civilian would never think of? Like, I mean, and then how do you kind of balance that? Because it seems like now, I mean, I've been on your website a million trillion times. It seems like, you know, you're also at this point selling watches to like the general public as well.
Yes.
Right. Like you don't have to be like a badass dude who's like freaking like swimming like commando with a knife like in his mouth, like, you know, on a special mission. Right. So like, what would you say like some of the differences between like the feedback that you get from like your general like public customer and like the special operations community?
I mean, the main difference you're going to have is aesthetical design between, you know, the person who wants it B2C, and then from the B2B side, it really has to have a practical use and a robustness that means it can actually be used in those missions, and as well that it's easy to repair. So those are the questions they always have, you know, prior to designing the watches. Is it going to break? If it does, how easy is it to repair? Is there a watchmaker in these countries that we can use, and what have you? And those are the general, you know, questions they'll have on the servicing side. But if not, you know, at the end of the day, they are quite similar to a some degree, where they both like to get heavily involved in the design of the watch. So as much as most of our custom projects are for the military or for other, B2B businesses, we do have, from time to time, people who will approach us who are celebrating a big moment or event in their life. And they want to, and because of that, they want to create their own aesthetical watch from a B2C perspective as well. So like we're currently working on a special project that I can't say yet, but it's going to be something totally different. And in the high horology section. And it's a person who really wants to create a bespoke field watch, but that is totally different to anything else than we would have done before. So it's pushing us to our capacity of doing high horology, which for a military tool watch brand, you wouldn't really envisage us doing a high horology, but we've got that, we've received that request, so we're going to try and do it.
I'm sure too, like, and that brings up a question that I hadn't really considered, or maybe just a thought. Obviously these people are using their watches with a utility application. Like they need something that's like field ready, dive ready, flight ready, whatever. So I'm assuming when you're designing watches, you have to think about like being ready at any moment, at any time. So like, I'm sure that creates challenges on the service side, right? Like, okay, a watch broke. It's going to happen, right? Like, how quickly can we get that watch serviced and back on the wrist? I'm assuming like, how did you even like get around? Because I can tell you, I've sent so many watches in. Like, if it goes back to Omega, like it's like 13 months. If it goes back to Breitling, it's like 9 months, or like it's like people who really rely on their watches like can't wait 13 months to get their watch back, or like 9 months. Like so how did you even like figure out logistically like how to even get around those limitations?
So it's twofold. One, it's keeping it simple. And if you look at the Milgraph, the way we designed that watch that is used by the special forces, it's done to prevent any type of damage, because most of the damage that gets done is through not knowing how to use a mechanical watch. So like it's putting the little red ring around the crown to remind them to close the crown before they go into the water. It's having those little grooves on the bezel so that when they're twisting it, they don't have to take their gloves off and be too aggressive with the bezel, which means it should stay, ideally stick in place. So it's really making sure that the way you design it, and then you explain it to the customer, that they're aware of what they need to do and how they need to handle that watch. Then from a logistical side, well, obviously Henrik, our CEO, has been operating in the watch industry, I think it's for over 12 or 14 years. So his network of watchmakers, internationally speaking, is really deep. And on my side as well, I've been in the industry now for 10 years. So I was at IWC before, working on global activation. So you get used to having to deal with finding watchmakers or working with watchmakers who are proficient enough in repairing those particular movements. And as well, IWC was a good example, because they do watches as well for the military. So I think I was well trained and informed by them as using some of their network to ensure we could get ours turned around pretty quickly. But once the problem has been identified, we tend to be able to repair it pretty quickly. It's not 13, 14, 15 months. It's we try to keep it down between 2 to 6. And 6 is if it gets stuck in customs or what have you. But the actual repairing part is pretty quick.
Yeah, I saw that. I was like, in my mind when we were talking, I was like, is that an IWC Pilot Seritanium there on your wrist? Like, yeah, that's what.
Yeah.
So I was like,
it's a Tribute 3705. Am I holding it the wrong way? No, yeah.
No, yeah. Oh yeah, cool, nice. Yeah,
so that was my parting gift. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of work for IWC. So
have you?
Yeah, mostly just like media stuff. Like they came here to Vegas, and they hired me to do like an interview with Toto. And then I did like they had some special kind of like activations here with AMG Mercedes. I got to attend those. Just kind of like small things here and there. And then I did some stuff too last year at Watches and Wonders. And then after, like, I went to film, I was working on a IWC Pilot's chronograph versus a Speedmaster video.
Yeah.
And so like I literally had like free reign over any of the IWC watches that I wanted to film and use for that segment. Um yeah. I mean, going back to Micro Milgraph or sorry, Micro Milspec. Um there future edition coming. So uh would you say that there are like a set of elements that every operator appreciates, you know, or people that are in the field that truly can utilize over the general public? And like, what are some of those like constant requests that you get to, hey, like you talked about the bezel, the glove, right? Like, what features are you continually seeing that these special operators are requesting?
I mean, since the Milgraph, I think the main thing that they look for is actually what is quite similar. It's chronograph because obviously they need everyone to be synchronized onto the same time. GMT because they like to know what time it is at home because they like to have that little reminder of their family. The bezel element, not all of them request that. I think it's specific more to the Norwegian Special Forces because obviously they operate in a colder temperature, so having to remove the gloves every 2 seconds is not ideal. But having it as well as a lefty, as a destro, I think is become one of the biggest requests just for the comfort level of not having the crown, digging into your wrist like my IWC here, because that's how you tend to avoid wrist injuries.
I was surprised to see that. Like, if you look at the Milgraph, like just to see the destro, right? Like, I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I never really thought about it like that. But I've there's so many like military-esque watches that have these obnoxious crowns, right? And
Yeah.
dare I say Panerai, right? Like
Big pilot, IWC.
yeah. Sorry, IWC. And then something too that like I was thinking about, and I definitely wanted to lean on you and get an answer for is, obviously like Micro Milspec is based in Oslo, right? You guys are
Yes.
Norwegian. You're from Norway. Like, what was the thought process like to make Swiss watches and to not, what, like why did you decide to produce your watches in Switzerland as opposed to like Norway? Because that would be freaking awesome. I guess there's probably not the infrastructure to do so in Norway, but you guys are putting Norway on the map. Like why not make watches in Norway?
I think it's a lot of it is down to marketing and perception. You know what? I think America is a good example, but like when I'm in America and we're doing these salons, the number one question I always get asked is it Swiss made? Because to an American,
Oh, wow.
that is what is the standard of equality is it Swiss made? You have some French manufacturers, like Cartier, Baltic, and all that, who do watches. Some of them are even better than what they do in Switzerland. But the reference point for the American market is it Swiss made? If it's Swiss made, it means it's well made, and if it's well made, it means it's high value. So I think when you're launching a watch brand, you have to think about what would be the perception internationally speaking, and kind of having that label Swiss made is a label of certainty and guarantee to us to a lot of markets. I'm not saying just America is like that. In Canada it was the same. I think you go to Singapore, Asia, it'll be quite similar. I think in Europe, because we have manufacturers kind of spread out a little bit everywhere. You have some in Germany, France, Italy, even Switzerland. You get kind of used to not really focusing on where it's made, just what's the quality of it, what's powering that watch. Well, I think in other markets, because they're not used to hearing about, maybe Baltic is not as big as, in America as it is in Europe. But, in Europe, everyone knows Baltic is French made, and I think even Cartier to a certain degree, people will think it's Swiss made, but it's actually made in France as well. But I think it's just an easier way of getting to where you want to go. Why struggle trying to justify how good your watches are, being made in Norway when you can just get the stamp and then you don't even need to justify it anymore.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I think as a watch collector, like I'm looking for, like I guess it makes sense, right? Like there is a stigma attached to like Swiss made watches that they're like somehow better than the world. And I think, that mentality has been like slowly changing because you can get amazing watches made in France, you can get amazing watches made in Germany. I mean, shit, even China is making amazing
Yeah.
watches right now. Japan, right? Like, come on. Like, so I think now we're starting to see kind of that retraction, right? In my opinion, right? Like it doesn't have to have a Swiss moniker to be like the best of the best, you know? And then you're starting to see like amazing watches that are made in like the Benelux, you know, like I mean,
Mhm.
Resence, for example,
Yeah.
like made in Belgium. Like, come on. Like, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So yeah, super cool. I'm super curious too, and this is going to be something that probably nobody else will get to experience except for our listeners of our show. But like obviously, you have your general issues, I guess is what we're just going to call them, like your general core collection. Um, but let's walk us through the process of like what somebody who's designing a mil-spec watch, micro mil-spec, will essentially experience. You send them the field testing unit, and then what, right?
Yeah, I think it's a convers. I think the whole process is generally a constant dialogue in terms of them wearing the field testing unit, testing out the watch, seeing how the watch, had its bruises and scratches and all of that, and then having the conversation of what are they looking to use the watch for, or what are the core design codes that they want to implement into that watch, whether it's having a moon phase, a tourbillon, just a chronograph, a GMT, and what have you. And then trying to work your way to finding a happy medium in terms of one, keeping the price competitive, because I think people sometimes forget when you go into custom, it generally means you can quickly rack up the prices. So it's obviously trying to stay competitive. And we find ways to offset the cost sometimes, because if you look at our core collection, we have 6 watches from certain squadrons like the Hercules, the US Space Force,
Yeah.
and so forth. And those watches were designed for those core, but the reason why we can sell it to the public is because the order levels were so low that we were able to get authorization to then sell that same product off to the public, so we could get obviously our margins back. So that's one way that we try to play with price to keep it competitive, is to create a unique product. But then if the order levels are so low, then let us allow us to then offset the cost and see if there's anybody else who wants to buy this watch. And that has worked really well for us as well. But I think from wearing to delivering the watch, it takes about 18 months, 2 years maximum, if you think about all the trial and errors of what you have to go through. And then obviously agreeing on the actual design is the toughest and most complicated point, but we eventually get there.
Do you send out like multiple different like field testing units to multiple different operators, or do you kind of like to just designate like one like operator to say like, hey, you're going to be the custodian of this timepiece, and like is your job to get as much information from you can as like your squadron to say, hey, here's what we want in a watch?
Yeah, I mean, we're a little bit selective. So originally we used to send it out to quite a few people. And then with the field testing, I think the first time we actually had a project, we sent out 30 watches. They all tested it, and after none of them returned the watch to us. So we couldn't actually see how it was worn. But eventually we were able to get, the leader of that particular group to get a couple of them back, but we lost the majority of them. But so that's how actually the field testing unit story began, because we didn't think it was going to be anything of a particular watch, but then when we realized everyone kept the watch, we're like, well, maybe there's something in this design, so let's put it out to the public and see what happens. But yeah, no, now we're a little bit more selective. So I think now we try to find 3 to 5 people who we think could be responsible of the watch. Some of them don't even want to wear the watch, because some of them know exactly what they want from the beginning. So like when it comes to testing the watch, like, well, that's not important, we know what we want this design. But people who are a little bit more specific, we still send out the watch to.
And something too that I've noticed that nobody really talks about is like, obviously if you're designing a watch to spec, like you have to test beyond the spec that you want to achieve, right? So like if you're making a watch for 200 meters of water resistance, like you're going to want to test like 300, 400 meters or even beyond, right? So it brings the question, like, what would you say are some of the most like meaningful customizations that you've kind of created for a unit or maybe even an individual, and how did that impact like the ethos of Micro Milspec?
I mean, I hate to go back to it, but the Milgraph is the best example of it. I think it's the ultimate tool watch that, and probably the best design and best watch we've ever created as a brand in the last 6 to 7 years. It literally tells the story of MicroMilSpec from the beginning to where we are now. We've done a couple of projects prior to that, with the field testing, and what have you, the Hercules US Space Force, which are nice products, but they're quite simple in the way that it was designed and even in its use. But when you look at the Milgraph in terms of the thought process behind the design, in terms of making it a destro, to then having that GMT, the chronograph, the bezel with the grooves inside, so you can twist it with your gloves on, to the little red ring around the crown. Everything was really thought of in every single detail of that product. So, and I think that's why it's so near and dear to our hearts, but I also think it's cool. We've done a great product, but now we need to focus on finding the next unicorn product and finding our new version of the Milgraph. Whatever that may be. Hopefully, we'll have something interesting next year. To present to you guys. Especially, last year we did land, field watches, and then we did the air. So you can probably guess next year will be C. So there you go. We'll be going down below and trying to create, a really deep dive watch, and and I'm sure you'll be the first to know. But I think we've got an exciting, new product coming out.
What would you say too? I mean, this is probably going to be a harder question too, and if you can't answer, that's fine too. What would you say are probably the most frequent, like, customized aspects of a watch? I mean, you're going to have people that just say, hey, let's just slap a logo on it. Let's just slap a logo on the Milgraph and be done. Or let's just change the dial color, maybe change the strap color, maybe like these more, visual kind of changes. But then, you're going to have an operator or, somebody in military that says, I totally want to like break this watch and rebuild it, with a new complication, or maybe like, something that like, you guys haven't done before. So like, would you say that you see more of the latter, somebody who kind of wants to like rebuild the Milgraph with you, or would you just rather, or do you more frequently just see like, hey, just slap our logo and, put our squadron colors on it and call it a day?
I wish it was the let's smash it down and like do something completely different and reinvent the wheel. But most of the time it's making, I just put my logo at 6 o'clock. That's like what I'm looking for. Or it's mostly, honestly, the biggest request I get the whole time is, can I change the GMT color hand? Because everyone has their own favorite color. So I'm like, yeah, if you want to, mate, like, not a problem. Or or it's adding superluminova in a particular color. But I think the thing is, I think people like to keep it simple with customization, because in their mind they're going to think, oh shit, this is going to cost like a shit ton. Well, yeah. and it can. I'm not going to lie. If you tell me, buddy, I want to do a perpetual calendar tourbillon with a celestial thing on, yeah, okay, bro. I mean, IWC does that for $500,000.
That's like an officer watch. It's not like a field watch.
Yeah, 100%. Or it's an officer who's made a head of a lot of money in crypto.
Yeah, that's true.
But at the end of the day, I think people, just when it comes to watches, I don't mean it as an insult, but aren't that imaginative. They would rather just do a few small tweaks here and there than try and do a whole process that might take 2 years to get to.
Yeah. I'm curious too. Like, that makes a lot of sense, but what would you say, because you're talking about forging, we talked about this earlier, but you're talking about forging like traditional Swiss watchmaking, but still kind of like influencing like rugged utility, purpose driven watches. So like, what traditional aspects of watchmaking are you still kind of holding on to when you're, designing your next edition, versus what aspects of traditional Swiss watchmaking are you just like, let's just throw this in the bin and like start over?
Yeah, I can separate into two categories. I think when it comes to a product, we respect the tradition of the Swiss, industry. So we don't really play around too much on that side when it comes to the production and creation of a watch. Obviously, we like to have fun with the design and what have you, but that is still respecting certain values and codes that have been there for hundreds of years. I think the side that we break tradition on is our marketing communication strategy. If you go onto our Instagram or you look at our adverts, what we've done. Just recently in January, we did like a Casino Royale James Bond spoof. Poking fun at our own waiting lists on the Milgraph, because we know everyone's waiting for a Milgraph, and we're trying to bring those waiting lists down. But every time we bring it down, there's just more people who get onto the list. So. Yeah. But I think we're very playful in how we communicate. I think we're a brand that has a lot of personality as well. I think people can flip through a magazine enough to stop. You can remove all the logos and stop and be like, okay, that's a Micro Milspec right there. Just looking at the page. And I think that's where we have to be different, because I always say my job is quite easy, because I find the Swiss horological world from a marketing perspective quite boring. Everyone, if you could buy a magazine, all the adverts look the same. If it's a sea watch, there's going to be sea on the background, something like that. If it's in the air, there'll be a plane. And like there's no differentiation between each other. So I always say my job is super easy, because I just need to do something really silly, very different. I steal a lot of ideas from wrestling and just go out and have a bit of fun with it.
Yeah, lay the smackdown.
Yeah.
I see that you guys are doing, and this is something that, like, again, I literally just had to look up, because, when you talk about like a lot of people who are like operators, right? Like rely on accuracy. And not to kind of poke hole in your strategy here, but a lot of your watches are plus to minus like 4 seconds a day. Like you have a couple Solitas like in the field testing unit that you guys are running like plus or minus 7 seconds a day. But I also didn't see that you guys are like, going through the extra kind of steps or process, or maybe just call it a freaking pain in the ass to like get your watches like cost certified or anything like that. Like, is that just not as important to you to have like a freaking little piece of paper that says, hey, this watch is certified to this accuracy? Or like, is that something that you're starting to see? I've seen on the sales side that people like literally, like they want the ISO certification. Like they want the cost certificate. Like they want these weird little things that really mean nothing to nobody. Except for they feel like it's a value play. So like if we could step back and talk about, how, I mean, it doesn't seem that you guys have or doing that. I could be wrong. Like, I just don't. So
you've looked into our future.
Oh, okay.
We are doing it. So yeah, I mean, we have a mole in the company who's told you everything. No, we're working on it. I think everything, when you're a small brand, everything's a process.
Sure.
In our case, it was first stabilize stock management, because a lot of our watches are consistently always sold out. So let's get to a point where we can actually have something to sell, and that if someone wants to come into one of our retailer stores to buy a watch, they can actually leave with the watch that day. The Milgraph, I think, will be unlikely. But your dual timers, your Herculeses, your field testing units, we're hoping to get to a point where people can actually buy the watch physically on the same day.
Yeah.
And then once we stabilize that, we've already actually launched a process to try and get the watches cost certified. And we're actually, we've been secretly working with a couple of other movement companies to see how close we can get to plus minus below 4 seconds. So cool. I think you'll see some improvements in the quality and the build, and hopefully in the reliability of the watch. But also you'll get all the certificates that we're looking to hopefully pass all those tests at some point next year. So good question, because you're the first person to ask me that. So
I mean,
there you go.
I understand the market. I think that has something to do with why people choose to listen to myself. I don't know, maybe a little bit, but I understand what the customer wants. And for me, like an ISO certification for a bezel, like, is not Like I could give a shit less, or like a cost certificate, right? Like, cause you're passing those costs down to your customer, right? And
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, of course.
and you can regulate. I mean, you could take a Miota 9 series movement and regulate it to cost, right? You just don't have to go through the bullshit like process to
Yeah.
get the watch certified. Like, because the certification body is annoying. Like it's an annoying process. Like it adds a lot more time to production. You guys already have supply issues, right? So like,
Yeah.
it makes an unreasonable, and I'm sure, you're going to have to elevate the price of your product to extend those, right? Because cost certification is expensive, so, you're going to see a bump in price, and I think somebody as a consumer appreciating like the value and, something that is like, way is going to perform higher than its price. Like to me, it doesn't seem necessary, but for some weird reason, it's like it's ingrained in like the watch culture, like the buyers like checklist that like I want a cost movement, or like, I want a Metas movement, or like it's like, okay, dude, like that's fine, but like you realize like that's unnecessary, and like you can get a watch that runs at costs, levels like efficiency, without having to pay the cost tax, right? So, um,
No, I
sorry for
agree. I agree. No,
way
I
over.
agree, man. I see cost a little bit like a tariff. At the end of the day, it's always the end consumer who pays for the tariff. Same thing with the cost. I think where we're lucky is I don't think it will impact our prices too much, because at the
Okay.
point of where we are today, because our production is going to increase significantly, then it means we'll get those economies of scales of producing more watches, which means then hopefully we should be a little bit more competitive when pricing up our watches, because the cost should go down on a general production, which then means it allows us as well at the same time to then introduce the cost to hopefully keep it at a relatively competitive price range.
You probably won't be able to answer this, but again, I've got the future goggles. Like, you're starting to see a lot of special operations units, operators that are leaning into the digital space.
Yep.
Right? Like, so tell me you guys are seeing that, and tell me that you guys are acknowledging that. And because tell me it'd be badass to see like an Anna Digi like Micro Milspec watch. Like, is that something that you guys have talked about, considered? Like, is it something in the pipeline? If you can't answer, I understand. You're starting to see kind of operators that prioritize, they need even more than plus or minus 2 seconds a day. Like they need like, microseconds of accuracy. So, so is that something that you're getting, demands from operators, or like what is coming in the future, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that I think you won't see it in the next year or so, but we're creating a section on our website called MicroMilSpec Lab, which will probably come out in the next couple of months. And that section is to really play around with the designs that where we really want to have a lot of fun with. And based off the reaction that we get from those designs, we may end up releasing those in the future. So I think, playing around with the digital analog watch, well, I mean, absolutely, why not? I mean, I'm all for, internally, I always say you got to get out of your comfort zone. And, I think I keep pushing the design team to do something more original and different than what we currently have in our current collection. And I would love to see an analog watch. So why not?
Yeah. How so you've been with Micro Milspec now for a bit, I think we talked about, and 2 years. Okay.
Yeah, 2 years.
So you're still
That
kind of a
feels like
baby.
longer.
Yeah, you're still
Yeah.
kind of a baby, but you still kind of like are there. But as I'm sure you're starting to see like your fingerprint in every collection. So like from, and I don't want to put you in hot water, but like, what is the Micro Milspec fingerprint when it comes to designing a watch? Like you're like, okay, it has to have this. It has to be 200 meters of water resistance. It has to have a destro crown. Like it has to be titanium or whatever. Like to you, like what makes your fingerprint of MicroMilSpec, you know?
For me, it's material innovation. So I think at the time when we launched the Milgraph, there wasn't actually that many titanium watches coming out at that time. I think from there, you have seen a lot of titanium watches coming out in the past 2 years. I'm not saying that we were the trendsetters or what have you, but it was just at the time there just wasn't that many titanium watches. Grade 5 into the level of complexity of what we had achieved. There really wasn't that much of a competition. So I think now that we've stabilized it, we've got the stainless steel, we've had the titanium. I would love for us to explore with material innovation like zirconium and, you know, tantalum. I can't even pronounce half of these materials. And just try and do something a little bit different. You know, I've been pushing as well for forged carbon because I think that's a lovely material that we could be using and exploring with. But I think that's where the future lies for us. We can't just stick to stainless steel and titanium watches. We need to have a lot more fun and kind of really use the reservoir of materials that we have out there. And for it to always be a bit, you know, have that chronograph element, because I think that always brings it back to the military, and having that little GMT feature as well. And I think that would be, you know, my thumb on MicroMilSpec designs is material innovation and chronographs GMTs.
Nice. Yeah. Something too that, like, I guess I probably should have asked you earlier, but you know, when you're working with like a unit, right? Like a military unit, like, and you talked about kind of like a vetting process, right?
Yeah.
So like, I'm sure there's people out there that are listening right now that are in military units that have considered, you know, getting timepieces made, you know, instruments, whatever you want to call them at this point. Like what does MicroMilSpec look for in a military unit to create their product, you know, to help collaborate on the next product?
I mean, honestly, I don't want to bring it down to price, but a lot of the vetting process begins with the price, because at the end of the day, we could do cheaper products and cheaper models, but it's just not in the brand DNA to do that. So we could use seagull movements and, you know, these other Chinese movements that are wonderful, but it's just not part of what we're trying to do. We're really trying to stay between the price range of 1,500 to 3,000, or I think $4,000, because that's where we see where the gap is doing customized watches to a high level and a high durability. It doesn't mean the other movements aren't as durable. It just means that, you know, we have a standard that we want to respect and stick to. So I think having that natural price filter, I would say, allows us to pick and choose the militaries that we get to work with, because very few of them will have the funds to want to do the type of projects that we want to do as well. And the ones who generally meet that threshold of paying that price generally have a very distinct idea as to what they want to do, and then are far more involved in the process in creating that watch, versus the ones who want to pay $250 for a watch, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think people are worried about like the opposite side of like watch ownership, right? Like if you're, and I know this is weird to say, like maybe insensitive, you know, but if you're putting your life on the line, you know, you want to be confident in the security. I know that sounds really
100%.
weird, and it sounds
No,
like
100%.
a fragmented idea, but like, you know, imagine taking like your father's Omega to like World War III at this point, it sounds like, right? So it doesn't make any sense, but you know, so how do you kind of like balance that, right? Like giving the customer a product that they can feel confident in wearing while they're putting their lives on the line. And then, you know, the second part to that question is, tell me that you've seen like one of the most like destroyed MicroMilSpec watches, or maybe a watch that has survived what you guys set out to build, like a watch that some, you know, maybe it got blown up somehow or something, and it still worked. And you know, you guys are like, well, we weren't planning for a watch to get blown up, but it survived that. You know, like you have to tell me one of the lives in one of those stories, one of those watches.
Yeah, 100%. I can start with part two. What we did actually as a gimmick in 2024 for Geneva Watch Days is that we were actually doing on purpose to test our watches in totally unorthodox manners. And one of those moments where
I saw this.
Our smoke jumper watch, and we poured a whole bunch of petrol on it, and then we set it on fire to the point where the glass exploded out of the watch itself. But then when you know everything cooled down and we could touch the watch again, the movement was actually still intact and still working.
Wow!
So we actually now have it as a display piece, as a museum piece in our office, as like the watch that survived the fire that we set it off on, 2 years ago, and we still, it still works today.
I saw the video where you literally like threw a watch in the lake in Geneva.
Yeah,
and you just like you're like, here we are in Geneva, like you chuck the watch in, and then like I think I don't know the depth of that, but I think you guys were saying that it was around 200 meters or so.
No. That was the fun part, is that we said it went down the river by 200 meters. So it went 200 meters away from us. And then everyone in the comments was, actually, the Geneva Lake is actually like 10.5 meters of depth. So like 200 meters is not impossible. So this is like false advertising. And we're like, no, you didn't read the sentence. It said going down the river by 200 meters, not in depth.
Okay.
So trolls do exist, because we got trolled on that one clip.
Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't give much like thought to. I just thought it was funny that you guys are just like, and then once you pull it up, like it was clearly attached to a string. People who haven't seen this, so they can pull the watch out of the water, and then he throws it in the water again.
Yeah.
I was like, that is freaking funny and cool, and yeah, it's just a unique kind of like approach to get somebody's attention. I think that you guys are so confident in your product that like, and I don't know if you've seen those stupid ass videos, but they're like watch cleaning kits, right? Where like they're cleaning like a Rolex or something, and then like they're cleaning it on a ledge, and then they're like, oopsies, like, and they drop the watch like off like a freaking like the Empire State Building, and then they go pick it up, and then they like brush it off, like, and it's like,
yeah,
like okay, but you guys are kind of like in a weird way, in my opinion, kind of like parodying that, that like people kind of like want these watches, and they make these watches to these insane specs, but then you sell them to people who, and no offense to people who just sit behind their desk, right? Because I do that, right? Like if I were to get a Micro Milspec watch, like I wouldn't use it to 200 meters of water resistance. I wouldn't dive in it. I'd freaking wash my hands with it, or maybe wear it in the shower every once in a while. But like, it was kind of a fun little parody, I think, and I really enjoyed. I was like, man, this is freaking awesome. So.
I mean, honestly, most of our conversations in the company is not around product design. Is what can we do to try and create something that's going to make people laugh. So like,
yeah,
and I think what we're doing with James is a good example, because my goal is to something that's always been in my head is, for me, watch collectors and enthusiasts as a whole love the idea of collecting, which is why they buy more than one watch. So having a collectible item that comes with the watch, I think it becomes almost like the little geeky thing on top of what you're already buying. So like with the first round of the Sabotage watch that we did with James, we created a little dog tag, obviously to represent.
I saw that.
Exactly, with both of our logos of Superluminova, a honeycomb texture on one side, camo on the other. And this year, for the second round of Sabotage watches, I want to create a comic book. That comes in those little plastic things where you don't want to rip it open, because obviously, the inner geek is, if you rip it open and open it up, then you've destroyed the magazine and stuff like that. And I really want, and I'm going to have like the story laid out, everything. I've written the script and everything. It's going to be a play on taking the piss out of all these CEOs of the watch industry. So you'll have the Emperor Megawa, you've got Lord Lust, who's a little bit naughty, for Nautilus. You've got the Grand Psycho instead of Grand Seiko, the Crown's Guard. And we've created this whole little universe, which I now want to tell in a little 20-page story. But also then having each page, you'll have like a really deep description of what that character is. And that character will obviously be poking fun at that particular brand.
Yeah.
And I think that having those little sides of collectible products and humor is something that people appreciate.
Yeah. Yeah, let's jump back for a second too, because I'm curious about the customer feedback side, right? Like, tell me about, you told me about the fire, right? Like, but have you heard any like stories from customers like of a watch that literally set out to live one life and ended up living another, in a weird way? And how did that kind of impact or kind of preserve the culture, at Micro Milspec?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky because we've got the best crash test dummy being Martin, who's Special Forces. So
Right.
originally, when the company started at the beginning and we were trying, we were creating these watches, Martin, being a watch fanatic, always used to wear the watch and after come back and be like, "Here you guys go. This is what's left of it." And
Yeah.
and at the same time, because of that, it allowed us to really work on, understanding how to create a durable watch. I would say because of that process and because we were closed off to the public and we were very B2B orientated for 5 years, a lot of those moments had come through Martin itself. Obviously, you would have had the odd, accident of someone putting out the crown because he was too violent with it, or the bezel breaking, but not falling to pieces like Martin would have tested the watch, himself. And so I think we're quite fortunate, not being one of those brands that have openly sold off to the public, because probably we would have ended up in that situation way more than we would have thought. But we've got our human crash test dummy being Martin, who does a good job in making sure that they fall to pieces.
When you guys are designing watches for professionals, operating, and I mean, Norway is a pretty intense kind of climate zone, right? Like,
Yeah.
What are some of the first things that you say, like, it has to check these boxes? Like, it has to be water resistant, it has to be temperature resistant. Like what are the first kind of like constraints that you guys think about, that like are the essential checklist, right?
I mean, we always think about obviously the ATM, so the depth management, because that tends to be something, even though it's got nothing to do with the durability, but for some reason people associate depth to durability of a watch,
Right.
which is why actually for the Milgraph, when we launched it originally, it came out for up to 100 meters of depth. But then everyone complained about it, saying, "Oh, it's going to break," blah, 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 even though no one's going to dive to 100 meters. So then we reworked the entire case to make it up to 20 ATMs, so 200 meters. But obviously, it caused us to be delayed in delivering all the watches because we had to rework the whole thing. And then the second one I would say would also be, I'd say case design, because case design at the end of the day allows you to avoid having, needless knots and bruises and damages that you might have onto the watch. So I would say the case design goes a big way to creating that durability, for the watch itself.
Right. Would you say that you've noticed too, like, maybe like features that you thought, would be important, probably not because of Martin, but features that you guys set out to incorporate into your watches, thinking that these are going to make the huge difference in like real world application. But then once an operator or a unit gets hands on with it, like, oh, I don't really care about this,
You know what? At first, we thought the main style of watch that was going to be created the most frequently was just a simple automatic watch with a date window and a GMT. We thought that was going to be the majority of the requests. What surprised us was the amount of people who actually wanted to keep adding further complications into the watch. So if anything, was the other way around, where we've maybe oversimplified it and we thought, okay, this is going to be what people are going to be coming to us for. And everyone's actually come back to us, but actually, we really enjoy that process of adding complications. So we want chronograph, we want, I don't know, a moon phase or like a tidal phase, for where this squadron's being based up in Hawaii or whatever. So I think what surprised us is, I think fundamentally, military corps enjoy the process of being able to play with their watch, and having those extra complications is that way of enjoying it.
Yeah. It also brings up another kind of thought, right? Like I don't want to say that you guys are over engineering watches,
Yeah.
but there are people who like don't know like how to balance like simplicity, practicality, and then over engineering the hell out of something. So like what is that at Micro Milspec? Like how do you not over engineer a watch? Is it just going back to the basics, or like, what point in your mind do you say, oh fuck, we've gone way too far,
Honestly, I think we're quite realistic in terms of keeping it simple. That's why if you look at the entire collection today, a lot of them have similar DNA design codes. So like the cases are generally quite similar. And
Yeah.
actually the cases are similar on every single watch. So we've not tried to reinvent the wheel as much as it has been engineered for purpose. The actual design codes of each watch and each collection is actually quite similar, which is what we're trying to change now today, is to create a little bit more diversity in terms of the design code. So I think if anything, we've oversimplified it, but now's the moment to enjoy. Now that we've stabilized the business, I would say, and we've got our unicorn product and a really good core collection, is what can we do to now have people continuously talking about us? And that's through engineering materials and also creating different style of case designs as well. So you'll probably see that in the coming years. It's what we're actively working on now.
Something too that I see is like on the website, you guys have a healthy mix of products that like come on like a rubber strap
Yep.
versus like a bracelet. So like, would you say that you see like an equal mix of people saying we want this on a bracelet, or versus we want this on rubber? Because traditionally, and I know this is like I have to be careful what I say so we don't get a cease and desist letter for this, but traditionally when you think of an operator's watch, like you think about the fail point of a watch, which we all know is a spring bar, lugs, whatever,
Yeah.
right? Like, so as I go through your website, you guys have I don't want to say the word, but you guys have a woven textile hook and loop strap with a keeper. I think you guys know what I'm talking about. It begins with an N, and it's a 4-letter word. So, so do you traditionally see people saying like, "Hey, we need to have a fabric, like a pass-through fabric strap," or like, that we need it on a bracelet and we need it on rubber? Or do you just see, the feedback that's coming in, like everybody wants their option, right? You're going to have operators that prefer a fabric strap, like a pass-through fabric strap, or like, people that prefer to wear it on a bracelet, or, how have you kind of like engineered through those problems? Because the lugs are the failure point and the spring bar is the failure point of every watch. I don't care how well you design it. You're always going to have to stick to that. Right. So curious about your thoughts.
I think most people actually, anyone who buys a Micro Milspec, generally they come to us for the rubber bracelet. And it's only little by little, that we've announced that we're working on a titanium bracelet that will be coming out in the summer for the Milgraph and the World Timer. That has been able to generate a little bit more interest in those people who are probably, Rolex buyers or Omega buyers who like to have those integrated, metallic bracelets, whether it's steel, titanium, or what have you. So it's kind of opened up a new market for us. But generally speaking, if you speak to Martin, our special forces guy, he wants something reliable. And that reliability comes more with a rubber strap than, a OTAN strap, or, whatever we want to call it, to avoid any cease and desists.
Yeah.
I'll just call it OTAN.
Yeah. It also seems like too, so like I don't have much more questions. Like, we're coming up to the end here, so I'm sure, you got a couple things to work on before you finish the day. But yeah, something that I noticed too is like the floor to the brand, right? Like the entry door to Micro Milspec is like right around $1,600, $1,700, right?
Yeah.
Like, is that like always going to be the floor to the brand, or would you say like you can still get Micro Milspec quality, like, and introduce a more competitively priced product? Or like, have you guys just consciously said like, this is where we draw the line, Like, you know, every brand thinks about price, affordability, performance, you know, durability to a degree, right? But like, you know, based on like the volumes that you're ordering, you know, the applications that you're putting them through and the way you're testing watches is like, have you even considered, you know, a more aggressively priced product, or, you know, another entry segment to the brand? Or like, what's your thought process around like pricing these watches, you know?
Yeah, I think for us it's quite simple. If you look at, you know, Richemont, how they price, we try to do the opposite to that. So we, you know, my brother who also works on watches, you know, we often talk about why the big brands are struggling at the moment, and you know, our perception is that they're struggling because, you know, a Reverso back in the day, I think he said in 2017, you know, you could find a Reverso for £7,000 or £8,000. So like in
Right.
dollars, probably 10 grand, 10 to 11 grand. And today that same watch, they're selling it for £12,000, which is more like $18,000 to $19,000. If you put the tariffs on top of that, probably more $21,000, $22,000. So, but it's, you know, it's the same movement, it's the same watch. Nothing's been changed. You know, IWC, you know, once with the Mark 20 just updated the movement a little bit, but it's still the same ticking thing. I think you gained an hour or two, but suddenly they're charging a grand or two extra for the same piece that you could just buy on Chrono24 for half the price, and it looks the same. So like, why would you spend that extra money? And our way of thinking about it is everything underneath 1,400, you've got thousands of brands competing in that space. And it's a space that we don't want to be in because there's just too many brands already there. You know, at least in Europe, you have so much option, you know, to spend under $1,400, you have a lot of options. While, you know, the space between 1,600 to like $4,000, it's a lot less crowded. You know, even specifically in the tool watch environment. So I think it's a space that we are looking to stay in. We're not looking to go above that at all, unless suddenly the prices of materials and everything explode across the world. But, you know, our goal is a volume business, but not volume at $500 US, you know, volume at 1,600. And to make sure it's a good quality product that, you know, people can, you know, enjoy, and that has had a lot of thought process behind that watch as well. Not to discredit those underneath 1,400. It's just there's too many brands there.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that makes sense too. And let's just wrap it up with kind of like I guess a good feel question, right? Like when somebody puts on
Tell me three things you're grateful for, Blake. Three things you're grateful for.
I don't do that. Like, tell me what you're grateful for today. But
this is a gratitude moment.
what when somebody sees Micro Milspec for the first time, maybe gets hands-on with one of your products for the first time, or maybe even purchases and decides to take this journey with you, like, what do you hope that your customers feel about the brand, you know?
The most important for me is to feel connected to a brand. So I say that my job entails, no matter where I am in the world, is to consistently reach out to every single person that's purchased a watch that's close to me, to pitch them an idea of having a drink, you know, having a lunch or something, and being in constant contact with the brand. I'm not expecting anything from them to buy, you know, another product or, you know, I just want them to have an interaction where, number one, they can turn up with their, you know, their timepiece that they feel very proud to be wearing. Two, to have, you know, feel that they're connected to someone who, if there's a problem, you know, I'm pretty well placed to be able to solve those problems. And, you know, three, just to remember who they are. I mean, like, buddy, you know, we're coming back in the area. Do you want to have a gathering? You know, meet some other collectors who are MicroMilSpec collectors, and have a drink and have a good time together. And that's all I do. And you know, everyone who has bought a watch in the last 2 years, they would have received an email from me, Anna, or someone in our team saying, hi, we have someone from our team coming to your location. Do you want to meet up with them? We've done this in Austin just now, where we're organizing an event in Austin, where we've just reached out to everybody that has purchased a watch. Be like, hey, haven't planned anything, but do you want to do a barbecue and a drink? Everyone's like, yeah, actually, I really would like to do a barbecue and a drink. And, you know, we've got people turning up. I think, you know, it's not expecting to sell anything. It's just to have that connection. We've bought a whole bunch of chocolates to give to them, and just have a moment where they could, you know, show us their timepiece, because this is the first time they're having an interaction with us.
I think that's what brands are starting to learn about. Like from my experience, and when I talk to brands, like when I consult with brands, like a lot of people ask me, like, because I sold watches, right? I have a capacity of understanding what the market demands, not special forces demands, but you get it. Like I understand what a collector and enthusiast would look for in a product. And I'm starting to see, and I'm glad that I'm seeing this, but a lot of times I just say, like, listen to your customers. You know, your customers will tell you what they want. Like, and if you're not listening, then you're not a watch brand. You're a freaking, you know, you're just, you know, you're not developing meaningful products. You know, you're just freaking, you know, taking money from them and putting it in your pocket. You know, you're not developing watches to your customers' needs. Like you're just developing watches for yourself, and then people are buying them, you know? So, but I also see too that brands fail at this miserably, but like how to communicate their products. Like every and I hate and you know, you see some brands that over romanticize this, but they like are like, oh, this watch, you know, reminds us of the water shimmering from our manufacturer, and like that's the way the dial has came to the, and you know, you get it. Like I love the brand that I'm talking about, but like you see people that like romanticize the stories like of a watch or maybe a release. Like people just want to know why the watch exists, you know, and you know, you can attach a story to that if you want, but like, you know, the more that brands understand stories, and you guys do, you clearly, you have a whole freaking section on your website about stories, um you know, the better off you will be, you know. So thank you for that, thank you for
No, no
understanding.
worries.
So
I mean, my background originally was hospitality, so I used to work in five-star hotels across, the world. And I always, when I joined IWC, actually at the time, the main feedback I gave to them was, I don't understand how you get a better service in a five-star hotel spending $500 a night than when you go into a watch store and spend 15 grand. You should, it should be totally the other way around. And it's the main thing that I've integrated into MicroMilspec. I keep telling everyone in the company, we are a hotel. We need to know everything about our customer, from birthdays, if they're getting married, is there like a key moment in the year that we can celebrate with them? Even journalists. So like one of our journalists that I work with in America turned 40, so he doesn't know this. I've designed I'm gifting him a watch with 40 on the back, key dates of that are important to him, and I'm going to hand it to him as not even to get anything back. It's an important date for him, and he communicated that to me. And I think having those things and working more like a hotel is going to get a watch brand to go a lot further. And one last thing I was going to say to you is, funny you should say that shimmering water analogy, because I'm not going to mention the brand, but I was at Watch of the Wonders a couple of years back, and I had a journalist who was like, oh, I love this dial. It was like a light blue colored dial, really stunning and everything. And I was with the designer of the watch at the time, and she was like, could you ask the designer in French, what color inspired him at this key moment to like create such a perfection of a dial? And the guy, so I speak to the guy in French, and I was like, okay, what's your answer? And he was like, I don't fucking know. I just like the color. I don't know. I was like, shit, I can't say this to the journalist. I was like, the color was from a summer's day where he used to like to have rosé next to Lake Geneva, and
that's amazing. Yeah, I mean, they're I mean, watch brands are like trying to make watches like ornamental. You know what I mean? Like I if it works for them, it works for them. I own watches that are very ornamental, romantic, or whatever you want to call it. I mean, we talked about a reverso just now, but what, like, to me, I tend to lean into something that like I could just beat to shit and like not have to worry about it maintaining its ornamental aspects, or like, the beauty of the watch. And then I tend to buy these really beautiful watches, and I don't wear them because they're so freaking beautiful.
yeah,
Right. And
get
like
a
that's just
MicroMilspec.
that's just me. That's just me. So Theo, I want to thank you so much for spending,
No, thank
just over
you.
an hour with us. I'm glad that we were able to make this happen. Um, yeah, I I can't wait to see what you guys are working on in the future. I can't wait to work more with you guys this year, next year, the years beyond, and hopefully I'll get a chance to see you this year in Geneva.
Yeah, I'll be at Watches of Wonder, so hit me a message and we can get us some time in.
For sure, for sure. Theo, hang out for a second. Everybody, we are going to link Micro Milspec here in the description of the show. If you haven't heard of them, I would highly encourage. As you can tell, these guys are really passionate about what they do, and they're really pushing the tool watch, rugged utility purpose, timekeeping instruments forward. Definitely make sure you check them out. Keep them on your radar. Go follow them on Instagram or social medias or wherever you prefer to stay up to date. Theo, thank you again, and we will see you very soon.
Thank you, Blake.